to the podcast Innovation in Health. And this episode is special, not only because we are having a conversation very early in the morning, but this conversation happens during the annual CIFA conference, Healthcare Dialogues, Opportunities, Challenges and Solutions. And the event calls for a special conversation and podcast episode because the Director General of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, Natálija Molla, is visiting us in Riga. She's also attending the conference today. So good morning.
Good morning.
How do you feel so early?
Yeah, I feel I had a nice fresh walk. The weather's good, so I'm excited.
How do you like Riga so far?
Very pretty. Yes.
Oh, thank you. As I mentioned, today we are having the annual CIFA conference where opinion leaders, policy makers, and field specialists all come together to discuss in dialogues how can we improve the healthcare system in Latvia. So every year we talk about this. What are your expectations coming to conference? What would you like to hear, see, and witness today in Latvia?
I think you have the perfect title, because you're talking about solutions as well. So it's good to talk about challenges and opportunities, and it sounds like you do this quite often. But the most important thing for me in any event is that you don't just talk, but you decide what you want to do next. And judging from the number of badges outside, you have a lot of people coming, which is great. I always find that when you have all the healthcare community together, including the policy leaders, you can make those steps forward. When you raise the issues or the challenges and the opportunities, you can decide together where you want to go. So I really hope for you that you can come out with a few decisions of actions that you can do together for the benefit of patients.
Do you think it's important all those players are coming together? You see Europe, in other countries, similar things happen, and are there results?
So what's important right now is that we've just had the European elections in the parliament. So we have a new set of European parliamentarians, and also we have a new commission. So if you like, our government at European level is starting new. We should have a new set of commissioners by December for the next 5 years. And this for me is always an opportunity to decide how we want to move Europe in the next 5 years. Health needs to be at the center of that agenda. We hopefully learned from COVID. That would be good. We realized how important health is for security as well. And together with the member states like Latvia, we need to make sure that Europe is very strong and resilient in case any other pandemic comes, or just in general, considering the geopolitical challenges we have at the moment close to Europe.
You actually made a nice connection bridge to my next questions I had for you, because regarding Latvian security and resilience, for the budget of 2025, security was declared as the only budgetary priority, and it's understandable. In this context, how is pharmaceutical availability, drug reserves, and readiness for crisis viewed in Brussels? Of course, Latvia, we have neighboring countries, as we know, so we are really trying to be prepared. Is there a similar feeling in Brussels regarding healthcare security?
So I've been to Latvia, I think it was 7 years ago, and I remember that your health budget was around 2% of your GDP, and now it's 9% of your GDP. So this is already great. It's a big improvement. Of course, it's not at the level of other countries because, as you said, defense takes a bigger priority. But it's really great to see that there has been more focus on the importance of healthcare systems and readiness. At European level, yes, at the moment there's a lot of attention on health security, on defense as well, of course, and on enabling technology. So there is a preparedness, if you like, that we're all looking at, making sure though that we don't lock down like we did during COVID when everything stopped, if you remember. So it wasn't a physical war, it was more a biological war that we were facing at the time. And I think the most important thing is that last time we had the technology, we found the vaccines, we shared the vaccines with the whole world because we had the right innovation and ecosystem for that innovation in Europe. So what we're looking at in particular is to make sure we maintain that ecosystem and improve it, because other parts of the world are competing for innovation since COVID very, very strongly.
Yes, if you look like that, there are improvements. We always sit here and think, well, things are maybe not that good and we want better and more, but looking in the long distance, things are slowly moving. And the EU pharmaceutical legislation is also slowly moving towards its development. And what is the potential impact of the new EU farm legislation on fostering innovations within the EU? Where is the balance for supporting and regulating innovations?
So this is the first time in 20 years that they update the legislation. It's quite unusual that you do that every 20 years, so that's normal. But it also means that it's whatever we decide now will last for the next 20 years. And if you think about the scientific developments of the last 20 years, it's been incredibly different. Suddenly you've had the genome sequencing and you've had development of advanced therapies and cell therapies. And so the legislation that we are deciding on now has to work for those scientific developments and the next ones, with AI and mixed combination products with medical technologies. So we need to make really a future-proof legislation. We also need to catch up with other parts of the world. So our approvals in Europe take twice as long as the US.
Oh, okay.
So we're the slowest in the world at the moment. So it's normal. We have an old legislation. So hopefully now there are some very good proposals in the legislation to speed things up, to be future-proof. There are things called sandboxes, which are, sounds like places children play, but in fact it is places that we can play and
experimental polygons.
Exactly. Experiment on how legislation can fit the new kind of technologies that come. So this is all good and very necessary. There are also incentives for antibiotic resistance, so really to make sure we come with the new solutions for antibiotic resistance. On the other hand, there are some proposals that are very concerning around incentives. So you asked, how does it support innovation? The current proposal is perhaps trying to solve too many things in one go. So in addition to updating the regulatory system and antimicrobial resistance, it's also trying to improve access in member states. And access in member states, we're in a member state here, is a very national issue. So there's not a lot you can do at European level really to improve access in member states. And I think that's the only area of this legislation which is really concerning. They're reducing the incentives to innovation that's supposed to attract companies to come and invest here. And they're trying to connect, giving you back those incentives if you give access. But I can't give access. I can't sell my product on a country just like that. I need to come to an agreement with the government. The country needs to be ready for my product, the hospitals, the doctors. So I think the equation doesn't work. And the risk is we've lost about 25% of global investment in the last 20 years. So it's a quarter of the global investment has gone somewhere else. So it's sort of a trend. And if you do that and you have this legislation that is supposed to be wonderful but actually worsens the attractivity, you're going to lose more investment. So I think there are some really good elements and some that need to be rethought. We need to deal with access. I know Latvia has an issue with access, but we need to do that outside of the legislation in a country by country way.
How does Latvia look? If you look from the European map of this access and innovation, I don't know if you have prepared for this question, but can you?
So access in Latvia is not great. So we have every year at European level, we publish something called the weight indicator, which is how long patients have to wait for medicines. And Latvia has a long waiting time. And this is one of the issues that as a pharmaceutical industry we want to solve, because if you produce products, you produce them so that patients can get them, not so that patients have to wait. That doesn't make any sense, right? So, so as an industry, we've been producing the weight indicator for many years. And then more recently, we put a strong focus on access. We wanted to have a European roundtable on access with member states and with hospitals and doctors and industries and patients to find solutions. And we haven't succeeded in that. But what we did do is we studied the reasons why there are delays in access, to really understand, okay, what are the root causes, who's responsible, how can we fix it? Before fixing something, you need to know what's broken, right? So we published for 3 years in a row this root causes. There are about 10 reasons. It's a lot of reasons. And so we wanted to discuss it in a round table. We didn't manage, so we took the reasons that belong to us and we tried to fix them. So we made a commitment 2 years ago to, so this is a bit complicated for a podcast, but when you have a medicine, you have to propose it for pricing and reimbursement in a country. You file it, and then you have a discussion with the government. So the filing is in our responsibility. We can do that. We can't agree on the price, that's a dialogue, but we can file. So we committed to file in every member state within 2 years of approval, and we committed to measure that, to follow that, to make sure that we're doing that. And these are things that we've done, but of course it hasn't created an immediate improvement because we're not the only ones responsible for access. So for me, the next 5 years at European level, I would love to have, next to the revision legislation, which is important, a real dialogue on access, a real focus on access, and make some real steps forward, like I hope you will make in your conference.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that today's conference is about dialogue. We're going to have a very innovative format, how we don't have speakers, but we have two people on the stage having a dialogue and trying to solve the issues. Looking to the future, what are the future innovation prospects for health and pharmaceutical fields? Where and how we can expect to see further innovations and investment? Is it artificial intelligence coming in, or I don't know, something else?
Sure. So it's exciting. We have about 9,000 products in the pipeline. So it takes about 10 to 15 years to come from an idea to an actual product. So it's a long time. And that's called a pipeline. And today there are about 9,000 new medicines in the global pipeline, which is really exciting. There were 92 products approved by the European Medicines Agency in 2021, which is about a 30% increase compared to the year before, and 6,800 clinical trials in Europe. Why is that important? Because clinical trials is where patients get their first access. So when you're testing a medicine at the last, as you don't test medicines on humans at the beginning, at the very end in clinical trials, it's the first moment where patients who need medicines get access. So clinical trials is a really important measure of innovation. So this is what it looks like, but more in detail, of course, as you've seen, we have a surge of lifestyle connected conditions in the population today. So you see things like Alzheimer's, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancers, which typically become chronic diseases. So what research is doing is really focusing on these because they're a very, very high burden on society, on patients, but also on budgets. And this is what we're looking at. So we're looking, there are new breakthroughs, of course, on mRNA since the vaccine that was invented for cancer, but then was used for COVID. Stem cell therapies, gene editing, gene therapies, these are all these advanced medicinal products. This for me is, I'm a biotechnologist, this is what I studied, this is what's really exciting for me. But what worries me is that there are 3 times more clinical trials on advanced therapies in China than in Europe. Twice as many in the US than in Europe. When I see these kind of things, no, you see, so globally these things are coming, but I worry about where they're coming, where the clinical trials are happening. We've lost about 15% of our clinical trials in the last 20 years. I worry about our patients being on the front line as well, and whether they be Latvian patients or Italian or any patients at European level. It's important that we're front runners there. You talked about AI. Yes, so there is a big growth of digitization, both in healthcare systems, but also in use of big data and data analytics, which is exciting. There will be some integration of AI and machine learning in healthcare. I don't know if in medicines, but certainly in healthcare. So the idea is that both in industry, we will learn faster what works and what doesn't work from the feedback we can get from machine learning, but also in developing your healthcare systems, hopefully we'll be able to pick up more information on the patient and improve their pathway, because for me that's one of the most exciting things. So yeah, the future looks exciting, which is good. And I think we were talking before about the role of Latvia. I mean, Europe is not a country, right? So Europe is really 27 countries, and that's a strength because each country brings its own perspective, its own plans to bear. I have like 3 nationalities, so I love the fact that we are European. It's sometimes complicated, but I really believe that every country counts, and this is why I'm so happy to be here today at the conference.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for podcast, and also thank you for being in Riga. I hope that we have a good day ahead. And I have a tradition that I always ask for those who come to the podcast. You know, you mentioned already the lifestyle. What would be 3 advices you'd give a person to stay healthy?
So I learned recently that if you vaccinate against influenza and or COVID-19, your risk of cardiovascular disease decreases by 60%.
Okay.
So first lifestyle suggestion, take your influenza vaccine in the autumn. It's really, I had no idea, by the way, so I should know. Very important. Second lifestyle suggestion is manage your stress. Stress has a really strong impact on your well-being and also on your genes, on your DNA and everything else. So find ways to manage your stress, there are lots of different ways out there. I use somatic exercises. This is my somatic, and hugs, but that's also hugs with my kids, yeah. And then move at least 10,000 steps a day, and do things that you like to do. Don't force yourself, but do things that you like to do to stay active.
On this positive note, thank you. We'll finish the podcast and see you on the conference.